President Trump announced yesterday that he's drafting an executive order aimed at banning mail-in ballots. It's not clear when that will happen, and yes, it will likely face legal challenges if and when he does. But the president said that the topic came up actually during his Friday meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Vladimir Putin, smart guy, said you can't have an honest election with mail-in voting. And he said there's not a country in the world that uses it now. Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots. And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots.
Mail-in ballots are not corrupt. Election experts have been very clear. There's no evidence of widespread mail-in ballot fraud or widespread voter fraud, period. And other countries, there are a slew of other countries that do use some form of mail-in ballots. Still, how do voters feel about this right now, since this is a topic that the president's going to continue to push? Harry Enten is here and is checking the numbers for us. How do voters in general feel about mail-in voting?
Yeah, they feel that Donald Trump is full of BS. What are we talking about here? Let's take a look here. Allow anyone to vote earlier by absentee. In 2020, it was about 2/3. You get 65%. Years after years after years that Donald Trump has been complaining about mail-in voting. Where'd the numbers stand in 2024? Basically the same. 60% of voters say that anyone should be allowed to vote either early or by absentee without needing an excuse. And that actually includes, get this, even 37% of Republicans. You have a substantial portion of Republicans who believe that voters should be, in fact, allowed to vote either early or absentee without an excuse. So the bottom line is the American people aren't with Donald Trump. They think he's full of it.
Well, and this gets back to the 2020 election, is where the basis of this comes from. And because in the president's false view that it was that this
it's
led
so
to
crazy
him,
it's tough to
that,
get
no
out.
that this led to him losing the election, that he actually did win the election. So he says, still, regardless, I digress. How do voters feel about the 2020 election now?
Yeah, exactly right. This is all based upon the Fugazi idea that Biden didn't legitimately win the election. But again, voters think that Donald Trump is full of it. Biden's 2020 election was legit. Look at this. In December of 2020, look at that. It was 60%. In December of 2024, again, after Donald Trump has been arguing year after year after year that somehow that the election wasn't legit, which of course everybody who knows what they're talking about disagrees with him on because the election was legit. The voters are with the side of truth in this situation. 63% of them believe that Biden's win was legit, despite the garbage coming out of Donald Trump's mouth.
But what specifically about mail-in voting regarding 2020 and 2024?
Right, exactly. So let's talk about mail-in voting, right? Mail votes counted as the voters intended. Voters who are confident that that was the case. 59% of voters were in fact confident, the clear majority in 2020. And of course, we just had an election in 2024. Look at that. 75% of voters believe that, in fact, the mail votes were counted as intended. And of course, this rise in confidence is due to Republicans going from 19% to 72%. I just think that this whole idea that Donald Trump is trying to push really just doesn't stay with the American people. He should move on to other issues and shouldn't be taking political advice from Vladimir Putin, who I can't remember the last time he won a Democratic election.
That's a good point. Thanks, Harry.
Thank
John?
you.
All right, with us now, Rebecca Carruthers, CEO of Fair Elections, a national voting rights organization. Thanks so much for being with us. If mail-in voting were to go away, who gets hurt? Who depends on it?
So there are so many people, millions of people in our country who relies on mail-in votings, the ability to mail-in ballots. When we think about people who live in rural areas where their closest polling location could be many miles away. When we think about young people and their ability as first-time voters to be able to access ballots. When we think about the elderly, many who are homebound and simply aren't able to show up on election day. So mail ballots are good for a lot of people, including the working class in this country.
How could a president get rid of mail-in voting, as President Trump says he's going to do?
He can't. So he could go ahead and bring it on. He could go ahead and sign a fictitious, legally non-legal executive order. But many groups, many civil rights groups and voting rights groups and people of sound judgment are going to fight him on this. quite frankly, the states should be up in arms because he does not have the ability to order the states to seize mail-in ballots. Each state gets to decide how they're going to conduct elections. In fact, we have some states now that are 100% mail-in ballots. So he simply can't do it. But also, Congress, where are you? We need you to stand up to this president because you are a co-equal branch of government. The president can't just unilaterally decide what he's going to do. Where's the courts? Where's the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court is the branch of government that's supposed to interpret the Constitution. And here it is a constitutional overreach if Trump moves forward in trying to get rid of mail-in ballots.
Because what does the Constitution say? Who does the Constitution say gets to decide the means of elections?
Absolutely, it belongs to the states. In fact, the states created the federal system. The states ratified the Constitution and provided for the federal government to exist. Now, what the Constitution does say for federal elections, and especially for presidential elections, the Constitution spells out the date that those elections should occur, but it's up to the states to determine how the elections occur. It's the reason why different states determine when their early voting process is going to start, whether or not you can register in person, do same day registration, or if there's a cutoff to registration before it's actually time to cast a ballot. This is simply the state's purview.
It does. The Constitution does say Congress can pass laws, but Congress, not the president. The Constitution doesn't give the president any say in how elections are conducted. It's states and then Congress here. Where do you see this going next?
So first, we have to wait and see if Trump actually signs this executive order. He has blustered over the last few months, claiming that he was going to do things unilaterally, and those things simply didn't happen. So this is a wait and see game. I think Americans ought to be able to determine who their politicians are. I don't think a politician, whether that person's in the Congress or in the White House, or even in a state house like Texas, gets to determine how voters and who voters can vote for. Voters determine that.
Rebecca Carruthers, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much.